This is
Make It Plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make it plain.
Get woke.
Total Tony Browder here on this Black History Month, during this Black History Month here on MIP, our prolific archaeological researcher, scholar, author, tour guide, IKG Cultural Resources, ASA Restoration Project, as he takes us back to the land of our people, ancient Kemet, and we talk about our history. So, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I do. I want to harken back to something we said in the last episode.
Okay, please.
I mentioned that Heru is the origin of the word hero.
Right.
Heru is known to the Greeks as Horus, and it's from the word Horus that we get the word hora, which in Spanish means hour, H-O-U-R, right? So how do we tell time? Time is determined by the position of the sun as it moves across the sky. That's why you use a sundial to determine the hour, the time of day. So we see Heru is linked to the concept of time. He's linked to the sun. He's linked to the Son of God. He's linked to the person who was responsible for saving mankind and leading us into a better world. Also, another parallel with Mercury. Mercury, Hermes, and Jehuti. Same personality is viewed through three different cultural lenses. Mercury is known as the messenger of the gods, which is why the FTD man has wings on his head and wings on his feet, representing swiftness of thought and swiftness of movement. So to the Greeks, they named the planets after their gods. So Zeus represented the sun. Mercury was the planet closest to the sun. Mercury was a messenger of the gods who brought the word to Venus, Mars, the god of war, Venus, the goddess of love, Mars, the god of war, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, all Greek gods. So what's the significance of Mercury being the planet closest to the sun? Mercury was symbolic of receiving the messages from God and then transmitting those messages very quickly to the other gods, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, what have you. So as I mentioned before, the staff of Hermes is known as the caduceus and is referred to as the symbol for medicine, right? The symbol for the healing arts, because you'll find a modified version of the caduceus used by dentists, used by veterinarians. So within the medical profession, and Richard King, psychiatrist, now ancestor Richard King, told me about this in 1981 when I first met him, that the word hormone, right? The word hormone is derived from the word Hermes. And what are hormones? Hormones are messages from the brain to your body that regulates specific body activities. So the body is the sun. Hormones are Mercury sending messages to the other aspects of your body, which correspond to the planets in our solar system, which are also related to specific astrological signs. So all of this is related, hence the phrase, as above, so below.
And then there's the term, that's fascinating. Then there's the term horology,
which is clockmaking. The whole mechanism, the whole idea of keeping time is horology. So again, we see a reference to Heru as the timekeeper. What's the dominant timekeeper? The sun. He gives us a 24-hour day.
Fascinating. So I want to say this too, because we talked about the and I got the timeline too, y'all. I can't unroll it all here, but y'all see this timeline. How long is this again?
That one you have is 19 feet long, a foot high, 19 feet long, and it shows you approximately history starting at 5300 BC until 2100. So the idea being engage in acts of Sankofa, retrieve the knowledge of the past, use that knowledge in the present moment so that you can become the architect of your future, the future of your children, your progeny.
And folks, this timeline is fascinating. Is that available for people?
Yes, it is. It's available at the IKG website. Mm-hmm.
So, folks, if you want to see the timeline, and if you have children, we like to decorate our children's rooms. If you don't ever do anything I suggest at all, I'll trade every suggestion I've made to all of it for this one thing. Say just everything I ask you to do, just forget. Just do this one thing. Get this timeline and put it around the walls, because it's going to take up more than one wall,
mm-hmm.
of your children's room. IKG-info.com.
We also have a smaller version of the timeline, which is 9 feet long.
Okay. And so there's two versions. So folks, IKG-info.com, so you can have this timeline and you will learn from it too. There's nothing, and that's what Tony is saying. I mean, we're in this battle when it comes to our history and critical race theory. We all got to learn together.
Exactly.
And there's nothing more empowering than that.
Mm-hmm.
So let me do this too, though. So the term that is often used when reference is made to the Greek gods, so to speak, or the Roman gods, is Greek or Roman mythology.
Mm-hmm.
Is that term, do you think, appropriate and applicable to what we're talking about in terms of Kemetic culture and the Kemetic Neteru? Is mythology an accurate term?
Yeah, and not just Kemet in West Africa, the Orishas of the Yoruba tradition. All of this information is based on myth. So we have to be very clear that myths contain truth, but they may not necessarily be true themselves. They are a way of packaging profound thoughts and ideas such that they're readily accessible to the average mind. You reduce it to its most simplistic form so that it can be understood by a baby. Myths are powerful carriers of profound sociological, spiritual, mathematical, historical, symbolic knowledge. And so all myths have to be interpreted by the correct person. And it's a matter of understanding that typically most myths exist on 7 levels simultaneously. And we have an obligation and a responsibility to learn how to unpack these myths so that we can get to the truth that is hidden deep within them.
More MIP after this message. I love that explanation. Very important explanation. It also, too, is important, I would say, isn't it, Tony? Because some people hear the word myth or mythology, and they immediately become dismissive of it.
Sure.
But all of the mythological systems we're discussing
mm-hmm.
and have been discussing, whether they be Greek or Roman, Kemetic, and listen, all of us, let's be honest, are aware of our astrology. And so whether, and some folk in the church are like, oh, that's blasphemous, you can't do that. But everybody in the church know what their sign is. All right. Mm-hmm. You can't deny it. We come up with that. That's just inescapable.
Uh-huh.
So when we think in that way, you're right. Mythology is a part of an inevitable, ubiquitous, long-standing, of the test of time part of the human evolution and experience. I mean, there's really no way around that, is it?
Every history of every nation is rooted in mythology. Case in point, here in the United States of America, there were myths created about George Washington, the first president of the United States. George Washington never told a lie. That's a lie. George Washington chopped down a cherry tree. And so we know specifically that story of George Washington never telling a lie, chopping down a cherry tree, his daddy came along and said, who did this? I did it, Father. I cannot tell a lie. That story was fabricated by a minister by the name of Parson Weems. Parson Weems created that myth in order to create this larger-than-life persona of a man that they love. There's a myth that George Washington threw a silver dollar across the Potomac River. That is a myth that is designed to show the strength of this man. The Easter Bunny is a myth. Santa Claus is a myth, right? The Tooth Fairy is a myth. So myths have been incorporated into the very fabric of human beings since the beginning of time as a way of socializing them and getting them to abide by certain rituals that are part of most societies.
Last episode, we talked about the fractions that are apparent in the Eye of Jehudi and what that means. But since we did, I want to just pick this up here now. Mathematics itself, since you mentioned fractions, the old, is it not true that the oldest documentation when it comes to mathematics is it pronounced the Rind or the Rind papyrus?
The Rind mathematical papyrus, named after the German who bought the papyrus off of an Egyptian. Yep. So that is the oldest documentation of mathematics known to mankind. And what it essentially is, the Rind mathematical papyrus is instruction by a math teacher to his math student. And we're dealing with, geometry, we're dealing with some forms of algebra and calculus, which was knowledge that had to have been used in building the Mir, the pyramid, in building many of the temples in Egypt thousands of years before these sciences were supposedly perfected by the Greeks and Romans.
More MIP after this message. And then we also have, if we're going to talk about the math, we mentioned this early on, folks. I mean, this is our earliest civilization. There's also medical papyri, particularly the Edwin Smith papyrus, correct?
Yes, Edwin Smith papyrus that details
named after white man too. Y'all can,
of course.
Y'all can see my facial expression. It was dead air when Tony mentioned the German, the Rind, because I made this facial expression. Y'all couldn't hear it on the broadcast unless you watch. But I mean, just white folks name stuff after them.
And the same thing too, man. You discover it, you name it after yourself.
That's right.
I was flabbergasted a number of years ago when I was in Mexico and saw that the poinsettia, the Christmas plant, was native to Mexico, and that it was, I believe, a British man traveling in Mexico who brought that back to Europe. And so the poinsettia is named after the European who introduced this flower to the European world. So that's what discoverers do. That's why this country is named after the man who didn't discover it, America, Columbus. Oh, Amerigo Vespucci, excuse me, Amerigo Vespucci. Yes, but cities throughout the United States and countries are named after Christopher Columbus, because that's what people do, name things after their ancestors, so that as one tries to get to the truth, you come to a dead end when you come to a European name for something that was African or Native American or indigenous to other parts of the world.
Or some derivative thereof, or some, as you all know, many cities in America are named after British rulers or kings and queens. Charlestown, Charlotte,
And most folk don't know that Charlotte is named after Charlotte Sophia Mecklenburg, who is a woman, a black woman. Dr. Edwin Nichols gave us that over 30 years ago.
That's why I said, I guess that's too much. We can't do everything in one day. Y'all's heads might explode. Folks can't handle that. All we talking about, and then we're gonna say that Queen Charlotte was a black woman. No, I'm just kidding. She was, and we need to we definitely need to acknowledge that. Many of us just don't know these things and have been miseducated away from these things. Tony Browder, folks, get that timeline, ikg-info.com. Order it, have it for your young people in their rooms, and for you parents,
Absolutely.
so you can know something. And when your kids are working on papers and writing papers, they can have something to refer to. All right, IKG info.com. Talk to you again tomorrow, Tony.
All right, brother. Take care.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. Please remember to listen, like, and wherever you get your podcasts, please give the show a 5-star rating. And please do spread the word. Let's all continue to pray for each other during this pandemic and this police-demic. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.